the back. You were told not to clap specifically, and we will not restart.
No, definitely restarting.
Welcome back to the 2020 Back Pocket Awards for Excellence in Video Gaming, both the production of and the playing of and with. We've gone to, yes, games are art, Mum, the best story category, the best story in video games.
Right.
We have seen quite a few stories over the course of the year, some excellent ones, some very terrible ones. We have decided to put together a list of 7 notables that have been chosen by us. We want to make a top 5 list because we know you guys love top 5 lists. And so we're going to remove 2 and then order these in terms of 1 to 5. 1 being our favorite, 5 being our least favorite of our favorites.
Sounds good. And those favorites were predetermined, like we had some light discussions. We like sent some stuff around. So this is our... Yeah, decided on.
It's a difficult category because storytelling happens in many forms.
Yes, it does.
So I always find these discussions very spicy.
Yes, and so unlike some of the other awards you may have seen, we are debating on this one, and because we didn't want to go down the path of having tons of categories where it's like, oh, best story, best character, best performance, whatever. We've kind of lumped tonally them together. And I think broadly, when we look at story, we're looking at storytelling, characters, world building,
writing.
Just the idea of like the experience of the narrative and the characters of a game. This is what we want to take away from it.
Yep.
Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's take a look at the list. And the list of 7 nominees for Best Story are Immortals Fenyx Rising, which technically doesn't have a hyphen.
Are we already going to have a go at my spelling here?
Oh, yeah.
Hades.
No, it doesn't have a colon.
Spider-Man Miles Morales, Cyberpunk 2077, The Last of Us Part 2, Bugsnax, and Ghost of Tsushima.
There you go.
We need to lose 2 of these.
Okay.
And I would submit Cyberpunk does not belong on.
Ooh, interesting. Well, I feel like we could go around...
You're just trying to be divisive.
Yeah, you are.
It's like...
To do this...
There's Bugsnax on the list.
Bugsnax.
The Cyberpunks you're attacking first.
Bugsnax, I think, should absolutely be on the top 5.
Okay, well, if we all go around and just like say out loud what we think we could remove, and if there's any double ups, that just instantly gets a disqualification.
Look at you being...
I think as much as I love Ghost of Tsushima, I feel like the story, while the rich history of Japan is incredible, I wouldn't say it did anything particularly interesting with the storytelling.
I will second that. From everything, I did not play it, so no, but I watched...
I will third it. I also have played 0 of...
I watched heaps of reviews. I've heard you talk at length about it.
Ad nauseum.
Ad nauseum, no. And I think it sounds like a really interesting setting, but from what I collected, like from all those reviews, it's the story itself is not that interesting in terms of the narrative to pull you through that world.
Yeah, it's kind of, your whole journey is to try and, win back Japan from an invasion, and that's a part of history, and that's, interesting historically, but I would say the story from a game perspective was the least interesting part.
Part of the reasons I haven't played it yet, because I thought that story doesn't look interesting.
And also, like, the main character, a lot of the narrative is the main character struggling with the idea of honor in a very, I am struggling with the idea of honor as, like, in your face, completely just like, all right, we understand that the Japanese culture places an emphasis on honor. I feel like it places an emphasis on honor as a subtext, not just the character constantly saying, I'm struggling with my honor.
Well, I think they struggled with it from a gameplay perspective too, because they were like, we're going to make him a ninja. Well, I mean, we're going to make him a samurai with all of the honor that comes with facing your opponents head on and fighting to the death that way. But then it's like, well, we really want a key gameplay mechanic to be stealth and stabbing people in the dark.
Yeah.
So that was...
Consider it gone.
All right.
Get it out of here.
List. Pete, you didn't pick one yet?
No, but obviously we're not picking one, but I would say that I concede that of what I've played of Cyberpunk so far, it's not an original concept. I believe it's telling the story in a way that is like reasonably good so far. Like the cutscenes have been interesting, the dialogue has been interesting. I don't know where it's headed because I haven't finished it, but yeah, I would say that of all of that list as well, there's not that many original concepts, except for, I think, The Last of Us did some interesting things storytelling-wise. I know people love Hades, and I haven't played it, so I can't rule that out.
Oh, I'm sorry, Peter. Have you read a lot of stories about people eating vegetables and turning into vegetables?
No.
What about we get rid of immortals?
I was thinking
That was
too.
going to be my next suggestion.
Yeah, it's drawing on all the storytelling of the past that's already created. The game itself brings an interesting spin on that, but it's a retelling, and therefore not really the game's triumph.
I would just think as a device, we don't often have games that are told in, particularly a AAA game that's told with an overarching narrator or series of narrators.
This is why I would say, like, if we'd split the categories, this wouldn't necessarily be best story, but
Best
like
storytelling,
unique storytelling mechanic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
but we didn't, and so we're getting rid of it.
Okay, Pete, so what would you lose?
I would like, if I had to choose between Immortals and Cyberpunk, I would lose Cyberpunk, but I would lose Spider-Man before I lost Spider-Punk, probably.
Spider-Punk.
Spider-Punk.
Did I say Spider-Punk?
Yeah, you did, but that was adorable.
That's cool. I'd like to see a
Interesting.
Spider-Punk game.
Yeah, I would be okay with losing Spider-Man as well.
Interesting. I think
And we're the only two who have played it.
Yeah.
Well, that's good enough for me.
Well, I played it. I think I'm at 7 of 8 hours of finishing. it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I think I put it down at the wrong.
I think
time.
you're actually dragging it out at this point.
I'm so ready to keep going with Cyberpunk though, so therefore I don't think I can take it off the list because I'm intrigued.
What about, but if you had to choose between Spider-Man and Immortals?
I'd
get rid of
You're saying here,
Immortals.
right?
You get rid of
You would?
Immortals?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so we're at a.
Well, then, if you're voting to keep Immortals on...
I'm not voting to keep it on, but I'm saying,
while we're cutting.
Yeah.
You would lose Spider-Man before Immortals.
Yeah, but I'm happy to see Immortals go if that's the
You would
consensus here.
lose Immortals before Spider-Man.
Yeah.
You've played them both.
Yeah, and I would probably lose Immortals before Spider-Man, even though I had problems with the Spider-Man
Consider
story.
it gone.
I just think it's at least telling a story, and Immortals is
I'm
telling
comfortable with that as you as the decider.
All
Me
right.
too.
Well, let me clean this up while you guys discuss.
So,
Working our way
okay,
from the
so
bottom up?
I feel like let's just start with an easy win here. I really do think that Bugsnax wins this category.
Oh, for God's sake.
Last of Us Part 2, I feel like probably wins this category.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, it just kind of has to.
it's obviously there are flaws, but it like the ambition of that game and the success that it had in the ways that it went about telling that story in ways that you didn't expect it to. I don't know how spoilery we're getting. We obviously don't want to spoil everything. I think it is a triumph, and I think even the parts that are disappointing about it are effective because of how good the storytelling is. The disappointment weighs heavier. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Nothing made me feel anything close to what I felt in this game this year. Like, in terms of the impact it had on me, like, it was just
You've got numbers there. You're
astronomical.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like, there's no game that I stayed up and played from start to finish in, like, a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't bear to not see that story through. And I feel like that is owed largely to the writing, but also the fact that no other game masters motion capture in such a cinematic way that makes me feel
Yeah,
like
the
I'm involved in
storytelling.
a piece of
Yeah.
cinema.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm there with those characters and the emotion, and then I'm doing stuff like interactively, and I'm part of that story in a way that I'm not a part of any other story in any other game that I've played.
Yeah, I would second that. But the thing for stories for me in all mediums, but games in particular, is I get joy out of not knowing what's around every corner. And for me, not just physically, I mean like narratively, like where is this story going? How are they going to address these things? What things are going to get tied up? What things are going to be left open-ended? And for me, The Last of Us kept me guessing the whole way through, not in a mystery way, but more in a sense that I'm just like, I don't know how this is going to go for these characters.
Yeah.
And yes, there's always the threat of mortality and death in that universe in particular, but I was just fascinated by the way they structured the acts. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was an interesting approach. And then I really, as I said, enjoyed the fact that I was like, I didn't know who was going to live or die. I didn't know who was going to have to learn to live with themselves. Like that stuff kept me playing through the game. Yeah.
It just didn't. ever end in a way that you thought it was going to. Every time you felt like the game was ending, it kept going, and
not cheaply. It didn't do anything to try and just like catch you off guard. I felt like everything was warranted, everything was earned through those characters. So that's for me amazing storytelling, and I'd put it up there too.
Okay, well then, Cyberpunk. Last of Us Part 2 winning. I have my problems with the parts of the story, but I still think that it deserves to win this category. So let me just tell you about Bugsnax, just so we can get this, so you know. And I'm not saying that it deserves to be number 2, but it deserves to be somewhere on here.
Okay.
The beauty about this story is that you come to this island and you're like, what's going on here? And obviously there's the weird shit about people eating food and turning into food. But the thing I did not expect from this game, which was a game that constantly subverted what I thought the game would be, is that the characters in it are very flawed. You come to this village and you need to bring people who are scattered across the island back and move back to the village because they've had a big fight and they've all separated.
Sure.
And then these characters are like, there are same-sex characters. There are
Same-sex relationships.
Same-sex relationships.
Right. Yeah.
There is a character that a binary character. There is a non-binary character. There are angry, hurt characters. There are characters filled with pain and fear. There are characters with no sense of self-worth. And all of this there are characters who are like hiding their flaws behind this veneer of like snark and sarcasm. And all of these characters, all of these very quite heavy emotions and topics, including loss and death, are being hidden under this world where people turn into hamburgers.
And you're catching bugs shaped like food to feed to characters to turn into food. Like that as a process is fucked as it is.
There's a whole like addiction subplot, like subtext with the food where people are addicted to doing this that then like plays heavily into the ending of this game of like what is actually happening on this island, which is batshit insane, and I don't want to spoil it. I really recommend you just play the game if you have any interest. It's a story that, and also it's inherently a mystery because you're trying to find this one person. Is that your mum again?
No.
It's just...
I got to mute my watch and I accidentally hit...
Do you know how to mute your watch?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, got it sorted.
It is poorly labelled, that button is.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's also just there's a central mystery that's very easy to hook onto, finding this person and ultimately finding two people, and how you go about that and what has happened to that person. Yeah. It's dealing with, it's really dealing with The Last of Us themes, but you turn into food.
Just to jump in really quickly, I feel like I missed an opportunity with what you're saying there and we talked about it in a previous award, to push something like Spiritfarer up there. I don't think it tells the story in a way that Bugsnax does, that pushes you into that perspective and really makes it feel like it's personal to you, which is why it's not on this list. But that same level of putting more grown-up or adult or darker themes under the guise of a more childlike approach, I think is really interesting, and I think it works better for this than what Spiritfarer did. But then I have to look at it and think Spiritfarer was better than Spider-Man or something. I'm like, oh no, and that's in a whole nother kettle of fish. But I think it's an effective approach for storytelling. It subverts where you think it's going, and that can help emphasize those points so much more, to the point that I'm going to play it and I'm going to see what this ending is. But
so that is my pitch for it to at least be in the top 3.
Yeah, I think that's justified.
And give it a 3.
You'll give it a 3?
See, here's the thing. I would give it a 2. I would give it a 3 and put Hades at 2, but I think
I would put Hades at 2 as well.
If we could pivot to Hades, it's again, similar to Immortals, it is a retelling of characters and a universe that exists, which is fine.
The conversation around Hades online, in our community, but just the broader games community, Hades affected people in a really emotional way.
Totally.
Yeah, yep, I can say that.
That tells me that...
Emotional way or really horny way?
Horny is an emotion.
Horny is an emotion.
Is it? And look, to be honest, it's dealt with in a way that, wears sexuality on its sleeve, but does in a way that's not for cheap thrills in the game. They're not just horny characters because that's what those characters might have been in the fiction from the past. It's it's relationship sexuality, and that's what really comes through in the way that it's spoken about. It's there, and the subtext is there, but it's also these characters are talking on a really, really emotional level about it all. While it's all, yeah, as I said, it's hypersexualized to a degree, but it's because they have real feelings and these are real gods.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think that the storytelling also from the way that it delivers the story as the drip feed that comes out, I think the amount of story in the game, I don't want to just give it like it has the most story, but there is so much story in it. Every time you come back home, there is new characters with new depth, and the transition from when you beat some bosses and then they end up back in your home, and then you develop relationships and friendships with them and see their sides of them. And also I love the inherent conflict of a lot of people who are like, you're trying to escape hell, we're told to stop you even though we like you and we kind of hate your dad, but we have to do this. And yeah, I just think every character in that game is so distinctive and so tortured.
You're right about as well. Like there are characters that you have dialogue with that you think here's the relationship, here's how it's set up. It's not two-dimensional, but it's like that's a me versus you, and that develops, and you'll get different layers of dialogue later on. You think, oh, okay, subtext. Here's a slightly different conversation, and then you'll kind of forget about that character. But then when you run into them again later on, you think they're just going to go through their standard lines of dialogue. They'll say something completely different that throws you. That's like, we've been doing this for ages, and suddenly you're like, oh my god,
yeah.
Like, I thought I was done with you as a character. I thought literally I'd exhausted every relationship sort of that could develop here. And they'll talk about it like you've played 10 more runs, and you're like, I have played 10 more runs. They don't say that, but
I have played 10 more.
Sorry, they'll say like you've done this for an eternity. Why do you bother? Let's talk about something else. I was like, holy shit! It completely like sidebar.
It's obviously good writing because again I haven't played it, but it is rarely as emotionally impacting to see text on screen, even though there's voice acting.
It's really
like
good
there's
voice
just
acting.
Here's a picture of a dude who's talking. Here's another picture of a dude who's talking. They're both shirtless, and it's like now be invested in this conversation in a way, in anything more than being like these guys are being cool to each other or being titillating, and the fact that so many people are talking about how the story is affecting is just proof of how successful it is in what it's doing.
I'm happy with it too, obviously, as I've just said. Also, yeah, I would say possibly the best voice acting I've heard in a video game.
Yeah, the voice
in the way that
the
the voices are characters and they're caricatured voices, but they carry with them such emotion, and the performances are stylized, but in a way that doesn't feel cartoony or forced. It's really cool.
And looking at the list, I think we're all happy with that.
You're not seeing facial animation.
No. It's a really beautiful
So the
piece of
performance
art.
is delivered purely through
Totally,
the
yeah.
voice.
And Pete, just before you do that, I will say that the final point on that is that something about Hades is I think a lot of people, and I've seen it in our community, a lot of people feel seen by this game. Like they are like, I feel represented in this game in a way that is like, I am not it's not just like, hey, even though the main character is literally a white guy, it's like I am not. It's not just that standard relationship that you see in every video game or whatever. Like there's so much nuance to everyone. Yeah, I think it's phenomenal. And if it wasn't for the fact that Last of Us delivers a story better, I think. Yeah,
it has those few extra moving parts.
So how do we feel about this list?
I'm actually really okay with this.
I think it's
like
good.
1, 2, 3 we're happy with. I guess we just haven't really discussed Spider-Man versus Cyberpunk. Again, Nick, you and I are the only ones who have played Spider-Man and are deeper into Cyberpunk than the other guys as well. In Spider-Man's defense, I guess, we both played Spider-Man and both found it a little bit lackluster, at least in terms of how it landed its emotion.
Yep.
It is, though, a very cinematic game.
Do you think it gets props for also being condensed, for being like a tightly told, shorter act story? Like, I don't think there's anything.
Sometimes
wrong
I
with
would say yes, but this is to the detriment of landing its story.
Okay, fair.
At points, just in like. Because I like the length of the game, but I don't like how the characters react to the story as it happens around them.
Sure.
Right.
It almost feels like Saturday morning cartoon. It's like something happens and then the next story beat happens and no one really reacts to the last story.
I agree. I have no problem with the plot. I just wish that the plot was over a 12-hour experience as opposed to like a 6-hour experience.
I mean, a big part of that is
it
that
ends up feeling rushed.
yeah, totally.
There are moments in it that I've hit, obviously, that are beats that are people who know the comics or have watched the Spider-Verse film and know the character of Miles a bit better. They're not as big plot twists as they might be if you're experiencing it for the first time. I will not spoil them. But it's essentially like, I think that's a reason they can move past that a bit quicker, and therefore those characters need to go, oh wow, okay, I'll get on my phone or I'll move on to my next mission, because they know people have some understanding of this character and what this story is, and I can see that being frustrating as a...
And I have seen people, and people have told me, like, I mainlined the game pretty fast and I ignored a lot of the like side quests and stuff, and people have said, oh, you get a lot of that character development in there, and I think that's great that character development is there. But if you're telling I feel like in a game, your plot, your main story should have all of your storytelling for that should feel complete if you just did that. And then everything outside of that is fleshing out that character, but is not necessarily like integral to then that main story landing. And I do think that a lot of the time in Spider-Man, I just felt like you hit a plot point and then you just moved on to a next plot point and there was no...
Yeah.
That being said, I like a lot of the characters in Spider-Man, and I like exactly one character in Cyberpunk.
Yeah, I do really love the... I think the performances from both the leads in Spider-Man are great. I think the scenes that they have with each other are fantastic. But yeah, again, it's truncated to the point where they don't have time to deal with the story around them. They just
And sorry, I don't like Miles Morales' voice, and I've said that a lot.
Yeah, I know.
But I don't. It's like I don't like the voice. I don't like the choice that has been made with the character, but the choice that has been executed well. I actually think my V, I rolled female character.
Yeah,
bad voice acting. I think
Same
a lot
with
of
the
the
male.
time.
Same
I disagree. I thought the voice
acting.
acting for V was really good.
I can't stand the male voice I've got.
Yeah, I've heard the male voice is bad.
they're a bit generic.
Yeah.
But
she sounds like what's her name? Rodriguez. Michelle Rodriguez.
Oh,
yeah, but
Yeah, right.
Yeah, who I hate.
Okay, fair enough. I will say, just for Spider-Man, like, as a credit to being able to take a property that exists that has had an additional character injected into it in the fiction and then making a video game version of that, I just think in storytelling in general, that's a cool thing. In the way that the Spider-Verse film has blended all their characters, like, it's a cool take on an already established, a overly established character. And in a game form, I think just like in the forms of storytelling, I think that's cool. I think it earns some extra points for me just for being an example of putting a new character or a new person into an existing property and doing a really good job of it.
Yeah, but then, and my argument for Cyberpunk would be that I feel like every story beat that I've hit has felt... How do we talk about this without spoiling it all? There are missions that I played in Cyberpunk where I feel in the moment.
Yep.
And that's exciting. I'm still in control, and the moment is happening, and that's an interesting thing to be a part of. It's a story moment that's happening that I'm witnessing and playing. Whereas Spider-Man tells all its story in cutscene.
Yes.
Right.
And then is swinging, and then it may as well not be Miles Morales because it's
not interactive.
It's the DLC from the first Spider-Man. So it's like, yeah, Rhino was in the street for one part of it, but...
Sure, but I feel like I'm Miles when I'm swinging because of the voice, the music, the setting, the different tone, and the story that came before and after it. So I carry that through, and I feel like I swing like him, and that's because I'm him.
Yeah, obviously they've done things to make it feel different, but... Yeah,
I get your point,
Yeah, the story would be identical if the cutscenes had the different character.
Yeah.
So it's like,
hilariously as well, both of these games, a lot of the story is told through phone calls.
yeah,
that is true.
Yeah.
My argument for having Spider-Man above Cyberpunk would be that I feel like V is not a character as well. I feel like V is a cipher for the player, like an avatar there, and that so far I have not found something particularly significant about V's story. V is just like this person that's being thrown into this situation, and some interesting things are happening around them, but they're not necessarily like taking agency and doing something. And it's identifiable.
I feel like a lot of games, with the exception of maybe BioWare games, where you create your own character, suffer from that a little bit because it's just like, well, we can't really write a story for this character since it's like
symptomatic
your
of being
story.
an RPG.
Yeah.
But coming off the back of, not the back of,
but like Shepard was not an avatar. Like Shepard, I feel like Shepard was someone who, like, you made really strong decisions about morally,
That's
I am
true.
doing this or this,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you
yeah.
created a real character that was the fulcrum around which literally the entire universe rotated. Like you were the chosen one.
That's,
and
That's a good
BioWare
comparison,
does a really good job, I think, of making your created character feel like someone that exists and has an impact on the world.
Yeah.
Whereas I haven't played enough of the Cyberpunk, but I haven't felt that with it.
No.
But also, like, I think Mass Effect is obviously is a really good choice because Shepard has a name and is a character that is known to the world. It's not starting from scratch.
As in has a profile.
Has a profile, exists, but your version of Shepard is unique to you.
Yeah.
And so, like, yes, it's those moral decisions that shape the universe or the galaxy, literally, through the vessel of Shepard. Whereas V is like doesn't seem to have that influence on the world, or even be able to make those decisions. The only decision you make is what do I spec and where do I go next?
Yeah.
The funny thing is that I feel like Cyberpunk, I would have been more interested in the character if you were playing as Johnny Silverhand. That character is that. That character is someone who has a history in this world, and who you could start making choices that either align with what the world already knows about you, or choose a different path to do that. And that anytime, even though I'm not crazy about how the like what Keanu says and how he says it, I am like, oh, you at least have an opinion on this world, and
that's attached to who you are in this universe and what people think of you. So I think, are we happy with this?
I'm happy with that list.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Last of Us Part 2 wins with Hades, Bugsnax, Spider-Man, Miles Morales, and Cyberpunk 2077 rounding out that list. I'm happy with that list. Oh my god, I'm so happy. I cannot believe Bugsnax got 3. I cannot believe it.
Yeah, it's a good. You sold it well, and that's what this is about. Like I'm convinced by everything you said.
I love something that has like a quirkiness to it and a mystery.
Totally. Yeah. No, my favorite kind of game. All right, well, let us know what your favorite story was. And if it was Last of Us Part 2, let us know what your second favorite story was that was told in a video game this year in the comments. And we'll be back with more awards soon.